Okay, here we go. Okay, so just a little introduction. I'm Cliff.
I'm Gil.
This is Gil. Gil works for Area 14 Sports Fishery Advisory Board,
Correct.
the local area at Comox Valley.
Don't work for him. I volunteer.
He volunteers. I'm Cliff, a guide here in Comox Valley. Fishing guide. I have independent fishing business. Now, we missed the Facebook Live with Canadian Fishing Network, so we're doing this little video so you guys can toss it out there and share some information about our fishery and what's going on. We're definitely not the gurus of all the knowledge, but we know a little bit.
We'll pass on what we know.
And
we'll try our best just to put everything out there that we know without trying to be too controversial.
I had my flannel jacket on for the Facebook for the Canada Fishing Network. I know red. I was sporting red there. Anyway, we missed that part. Unfortunately, and it's because of Apple iPhone. I'm getting a Samsung.
Let's move on.
Because Apple, I couldn't plug in. Anyway, let's move on. So, let's talk about first of all, what happened.
Or what is happening.
What is happening, what happened.
We've got new regulations that say that we cannot keep any Chinook salmon here. And we can still go out there and fish, but we have to practice catch and release. But still, it's for the boys out here in BC, we kind of like to keep fish, at least one or two, but it's just what the issue is. It's just what the regulations say, so we're not going to...
What's the closures from Port Hardy?
Yeah, it's Port Hardy South, which is the northern tip of Vancouver Island, south all the way to the Washington state border. So right
Victoria waters,
yeah,
Nanaimo waters,
yeah. So
Campbell River.
It's basically it's on the inside of waters, because it's not including the west coast of Vancouver Island.
Well, sorry, it is.
It is?
Offshore.
Offshore, yes, but
so,
not inshore.
On the west coast of Vancouver Island, you're allowed to fish inside passages like inside Banfield, inside Gold River, inside Nooka,
Cayucot, all the different
and
sounds.
Then to a mile offshore, and then it's closed until, like, our area is July 15th. I know down off Vancouver area it's July 30th. 31st.
I believe so. August 1st.
It's open again for retention of one Chinook. But on the west coast, on the inside passages, you can catch 2 Chinook per person and retain them.
Normal fishing.
Normal fishing. I've fished those times a lot. I can't say I've been highly successful inside those inlets, but that's for, I know guides that can find those fish there for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Inside Cree and Banfield and stuff like that. I heard it's really good there right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, fishing's really good here. I've been out all this weekend. Lots of catch and releases of springs. And that's another topic, I guess, catch and release.
Yeah.
That we never touched on with Scotty. But
well, it's a lot of fun, I'll tell you that.
One thing I'd like to get out there is proper handling of... I prefer, personally, not to handle them. I prefer to pop them off the hook while they're in the water. Generally, they take right off. Hopefully are living happily ever after. But handling of the fish, I'm going to have clients that are going to want to take a picture, and I'm struggling with this. I'm going to try and talk them into not doing it, but there is a way they can hold it properly, take a quick picture down by the water, hopefully, and lean over the boat and just keep it in the water. It's my philosophy on it, but that's so I got to work on that. It opens up a new part of my business, which I gotta make happen, right? hatcheries?
Well, we noticed that there is some information, or maybe some information that requested. Why don't we just continue with hatcheries or build new hatcheries or whatever? We here in BC we do have a lot of hatcheries. We've got a lot of them, and it's there's lots of issues with it. But generally, what we need to do is increase the budgets to the hatcheries, because we've been living with about 10 or 15 years worth of budget cuts. We sort of seem to get the short end of the stick here when it comes to monies for our hatcheries. So we certainly could use some more hatcheries or more budgets to the hatcheries that we have. That
Right.
would be handy. And I know that we did have one hatchery that's a Chilliwack hatchery that got $1.5 million to do some expansion and to increase the amount of Chinooks that they raise, and that'll be very handy too. But of course, these fish are not going to come back for 3, 4, and 5 years. So
Right.
that's a bit more of a medium-term solution to some of our issues.
Right.
But overall, it would be nice if we can increase the budgets to the hatcheries and let them figure out the best way forward.
Information I got from guys in Vancouver is that the hatcheries were cut in that area in the early 90s, but it was up to like 10 million smolts they were releasing at that time. Maybe I got the number not accurate, but as far as I know, the numbers have decreased for smolts released from those hatcheries, and probably because of budget cuts.
Well, I used to
that
track.
correct?
I used to track a lot of budgets specifically for. There's a hatchery near us, and it's called the Puntledge River Hatchery, and well, we've been tracking that, and I would say over the last 15 years, it always seems to we get another 5 or 7 or 10% cut every year, and we just sort of, it was just being slowly eroded in the budgets, and over the last couple of years, the budgets have gotten better. I don't know how much better, but things are improving.
Okay, that's good news.
So we're not. Our little area here, Comox Valley, is not doing too bad.
Cowichan
It's the
River
Fraser
had-
we got to worry about, though.
It's a Fraser. The Cowichan River on the island had a great return, right?
Cowichan is north of Victoria. It's before we get to the Malahat, which is a major mountain pass, I guess. Anyway, the Cowichan hatchery, they did a lot of work on their river. There was a big clay bank that was always sloughing off into the river, and then that was the clay, the fines were getting into the spawning beds and then killing the eggs. So they managed to do a bunch of work to the clay bank and to stop the erosion. And they also did a lot of work in the estuary, which is the interface between the river and the ocean. And it's a major part to where when the small salmon, the smolts, come out, where they have some time to acclimatize to the ocean. And they do a little bit of their life cycle right there in the estuary. So they did a huge amount of work there. We've probably spent millions and millions of dollars on that one.
What was about spearfishing too?
Let's not talk about
What
that
the
right now. Okay, let me continue with this
Oh,
part here.
sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so what we found was that we didn't actually have to increase the amount of hatchery fish for Chinooks, because by fixing up the freshwater part and the saltwater interface at the estuary, we were having the smolts that were coming out, the wild smolts and the hatchery smolts, they were surviving to adulthood and returning as adults. So we went from, where we were having, 500 Chinook back to 1,000 Chinook back, to last year we've got like over 10,000 Chinook back. So we dropped the amount of hatchery fish that we're producing, and the wilds were surviving. So the key to the success on the Cowichan was basically, the biggest success was what we had what we called a round table, where we got industry that works out of there. We had recreational fishermen that are out of there. We had First Nations fisheries, and anybody in the community that cared about what was happening with the Chinook and with the coho and all the salmon. So we got all these people together, and we all got together, and we communicated with each other, and we spoke to each other about what our needs were, and we put together a plan, and we got budgets from the province and from DFO and put that into action. And several years later, like last year and year before, we're seeing huge results. So if we want to look at a system that has positive results, a Cowichan River is a very good one. Did you want to talk about First Nations on that?
Well, no, you kind of covered that. But
Yeah.
the what I think that means, I hopefully the Fraser River and the creeks and it's not just it's the Thompson and the Harrison and the creeks that go into those rivers.
Yes.
That are the issue here. Hopefully their communities and their First Nations can get together and try and work on those at the salmon rearing beds there, because I hear they're in trouble.
Well,
Because of the snow,
yes.
the mountains,
Fires,
fires,
snowpack.
snowpack's the issue.
We
The last 3 years, right? We've had droughts. Let's not kid ourselves. We've had major fires, which I've never seen. I've lived on the island since '87, and I've never seen so much smoke.
yeah.
And it's
Well,
been 3 years.
last year we had a record wildfires. The year before we had a record wildfires. So we've had two years that have been really bad, like records. And what happens is you burn off a lot of these areas near the streams, and then erosion happens, and the erosion, those fines get onto the salmon beds, and they can either clog up the bed itself,
Right.
or it covers up the eggs, and it suffocates the eggs.
So hopefully they can get together there and try and curb the damage done from those fires. I don't know how. I heard blueberry farms are being
That I don't.
next to the rivers up there. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know
I
much
heard
about blueberry
farms
farms.
is a problem too, and erosion, like the banks and stuff. But
And
I'm not an expert on that one, so it's,
So let's back up a little bit here, and let's talk about the blob. Now, the blob is a weather phenomena that happened in the Northeast Pacific, which is from the Aleutian Islands up near Alaska, all the way down south to approximately Washington State. And that's a huge part of the Pacific Ocean, just absolutely huge. And what had happened was there was a weather phenomena, what they call a ridiculously low blocking weather phenomena. I don't quite know why, but what happened was it was very still air, and what happened is the water temperature, the first 100 meters, the water temperature was about between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius above normal. And when we have warm Pacific water, it's bad for salmon. The salmon that are out there trying to grow to be adults, really bad, because they don't have the food, and the food is what's critical for them to grow.
so the planktons.
The planktons, the zooplanktons, the base of the food chain is the
And this is
zooplanktons.
offshore. How far offshore is this? Like 50 miles?
It went all the way
100
to
miles?
No, it was like
Russia?
1,000 miles. It was
Russia?
It was absolutely huge.
Yeah.
It was over 1,000 miles
Big.
big. It
Wow.
almost all the way to Russia.
And the El Nino's same time?
Well, no, an El Nino came after the big blob. Now, the blob, what was happening is generally we can heat up the Pacific Ocean, and that's kind of normal. But in the wintertime, we get huge storms, and it churns up the water and it cools things down.
Right.
But we didn't get those winter storms for a couple of years in a row. So the heat kept accumulating, and then we finally got a winter where it broke it up, and then of course we got an El Nino,
So basically,
which was like all over again.
so
We had the same
basically
problem.
because of that, the survivability of the large schools of salmon out there it affects the amount that return.
Exactly.
In a
exactly.
nutshell.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. We could talk numbers. We're talking, if there's 100 springs, Chinooks, if only one returns, that's not good.
Yeah.
And there's 100,000 of them. That's like how many you're going to return, right? But on good ocean conditions, you were saying out of 100 of those fish, 5 return to the rivers. Then we're having a good year.
Then we're having a bumper year.
So that definitely could be to Gil's opinion, that's the main issue with the
fish.
Low numbers and the three, and it makes sense. But
when it's the survival of the smolts. Like,
yeah,
if you have 100 smolts leave in the springtime to go out into the ocean and grow up to return in 3, 4, or 5 years, the percentage of those survival is really critical. Like
right.
if like what Cliff just said, if the survival is 1%, we're going to have really bad year. But if the survival is like 5%, hey, we could have a pretty good year, because you know, if you have 100 fish and smolts leave and 5% come back, that's 5 adults coming back for every 100. But if you only have 1%, well, that's only 1 fish coming back as from those 100 smolts, and that's critical. And we were having very poor returns, maybe 1%, maybe 0.5%. It was really bad.
Those numbers we were looking at.
Yes.
Like this.
Well, and here we have these numbers of some of the fish that were really concerned. You can't see it, but
the Fraser River.
But here's some numbers from the Fraser River. The springs, they return in the springtime, which is the fish that we're worried about right now. They return as 4-year-olds, and they stay in the freshwater for 2 years. They mature in the freshwater for 2 years, as turning into smolts. Go out into the North Pacific, and then for 4 years, or for 2 more years, and then they return. And what happened in 2014, when these fish were brood fish, there's 25,000 adult fish that spawned that year in 2014. And last year, when they returned, there was only 2,000 fish that returned. So we lost pretty close to 90% of those fish. That's huge, absolutely huge.
That brings me to one of Scotty's questions, was with the warmer waters, and did the Chinook have a problem finding their home rivers?
Yeah.
But do you think there's an issue with that? How do the Chinook get to their home rivers there?
Well, the Chinook have a built-in GPS. It's not quite GPS, but it's more like a compass. If you were to look at the magnetic field of the Earth has got, it's not uniform magnetism throughout the whole Earth. So the fish can hone in and find the right area to come back using the magnetic field in the Earth. And once they get close to the rivers, then they use their nose and they smell for the smell of the river, and that's how they find their way.
So they have a built-in GPS.
It's like they have a built-in compass or a built-in GPS.
So then, what happens if they don't go up the river?
There is
a theory on that.
They do stray, and we have been finding that there's been more straying, but we're not positive as to why they're straying more. The fish will come back, and sometimes they'll go up a different river, and part of it is natural that you want to have a percentage of fish stray, because let's say there is some issue in nature where a river wipes out all of its run. Well, you have to have fish come back in a straying mode so they can repopulate that river. Right. So nature's built in to have maybe 2% straying or 4% straying. But recently we've been having a lot more straying, and we really don't know exactly why. There is some idea that maybe it's something to do with the increasing of CO2 in the water, but we don't know for a fact.
I think it's a lot of it's with cycles. my opinion,
Could be.
cycles and salmon are one tough fish.
Oh, you betcha they
Their
are.
survivability over the hundreds of years.
They're like a weed.
They've gone down. Like, interesting numbers Gil looked at earlier. In 1974, I don't want to pound on this one, but 1974 the numbers were as low as they are now on the was it the Fraser? Those
1975, depending on which one.
75?
1975, but I don't know why they were low like that in 1975. It could have been
Neither do I.
overfishing.
It was
Could have
before
been
my
overfishing.
time fishing, so it's like when I was a
You-
kid. I was a kid.
Usually things like that are,
But it's kind
Due
of
to-
interesting, right? I believe in cycles.
well,
I believe in environmental cycles. Sorry.
well, whatever.
Anyway, environment is something we can't control. We can control when we all need to be aware of it.
Yeah, well,
But what can we as sports fishermen do about the blob?
there's,
seriously.
there's nothing we can do about the
Be
blob.
aware of it.
But to be aware of it is right, and hope that it doesn't come back, because it's not a good thing.
So I'm looking at solutions. I always look for solutions of how we can improve these salmon and help them, right?
Well, we can't do anything about what happens out in the North Pacific, but what I always like to think about it is like the salmon are usually being affected by the death of 1,000 cuts. Okay, so we've got issues. We've got like the North Pacific with a heated water and lack of food.
Right.
That's not good. Okay, but there's not a whole lot we can do about it.
There's fish farms.
Okay, on the
Another
migration route,
There's
there can be fish farms. Now, we know enough about fish farms that we should not probably have them on the migration route. And there has been a lot of movement right now to get them off the migration route, and I see that as a big plus. We don't know exactly everything about everything on that, but we know enough that we
my big plus would be
Get 'em off the
Put them
migration.
inland.
put them on land.
But-
That's
but-
even better.
I know they've proven that they can go on inland. It costs more money.
Yes.
Will the government enforce that? I would like to see it, but just because it's one thing you can rule out, it's one of the things that man created and man can rule it out easy enough
Yes, we can affect that.
to help.
We
If
can
it
affect
helps,
that.
The
That's for sure.
the numbers in general have gone down
Yes.
since the introduction of fish farms.
Yes.
It could be
definitely.
one of the factors
Yeah.
of your 1,000 cuts we're talking about here.
Yes, it could be. Who knows how much of a factor is it?
It's
is
complicated,
Is
folks.
it 1%, 10%, 50%? We don't know. We
It's
just don't
complicated. I'd like to see fish farms inland, but
know. Me too. but
getting them off the migration routes is a start.
that's a start. Exactly. I think the Conan Commission actually said something about that to get them off the migration routes.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're trying to get Scotty's questions covered here. It's a lot.
Haida Gwaii?
Hi to Guay,
Okay, Haida Gwaii is north of Vancouver Island. It's quite a bit up there. It's
Queen Charlotte's, right?
Yeah, that's called the Queen Charlotte Islands in the old days, and now we call it Haida Gwaii. As far as I know, it's still normal fishing up there. There are probably some rivers with some issues, but
The Skeena.
the
The Skeena
Skeena,
was closed last year, but this year it's open again.
yeah,
So there must be
There must
some
be.
numbers
there must be something good up there.
to to help that. But the I've heard some rumors about the whales. They're off Rupert. I don't know a lot about
Okay,
it.
that's further south.
I don't know a lot about it. But
We have two. Well, I guess we could get into the whales, the killer whales. We have two kinds of killer. Well, we've got more. We actually have three kinds of killer whales. We have offshore, transients, and residents. Offshores, they're way the hell out there, and we don't even concern ourselves with those for recreational. The next one is the transients, and the transients, they swim up and down, and
they're doing well.
They're doing very well, and they're a predator of seals and sea lions.
and dolphins.
Now and dolphins, yeah.
Porpoises.
Porpoises too. Yep.
But yeah,
And then the
they're
ones
my
that,
friends.
mine too. The ones we're worried about are the resident killer whales. And out of the resident killer whales, we have a northern population and we have a southern population. The northern population is doing really well and it's growing.
That's in
It's-
our area. right?
Yes,
indoor.
they can come down to here. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the ones that are near Vancouver, Victoria, and those ones usually they stay around that area, and they'll also migrate to as far as San Francisco, I believe, or Southern
Right.
California.
They go down
all the way
for
down
the
to
winters,
there.
right?
Yeah, only about 3/4 of them go there, and a quarter of them stay here.
Right.
So it's there's pods. There's J, K, and L. Anyway,
With that, there's recent announcements.
oh yes.
On those, right?
Now the southern killer whales, they eat salmon, and they're pretty picky. They really like to eat large Chinook salmons, but they will also eat coho and chum. But for some reason they don't like sockeye and pink. I don't know, whatever. But their preferred food is Chinook, and it's probably something to do with they hunt with echolocation, and it's probably a lot to do with it's much easier to get a big Chinook using echolocation than to get a smaller Chinook. So they're usually looking for the 4-year-old Chinooks or the 5-year-old Chinooks.
Right.
We're talking 22 to 35 pounders. That's the ones they're maybe 25 to 35 pounders. Those are the ones they key in on. And
But that's.
those are the fish that we're worried about.
But that being said, the population has decreased by how many? 4 or 10?
Well,
is it 10? The numbers are about the same as this in the 60s.
70s, I think.
Or they're higher. They're
I think
higher
there's-
than the 60s and 70s.
I think there's 74 of them that are there,
Oh.
and
and they've gone up and down.
they have gone up and down.
The numbers.
yes.
So
but
it's,
a lot of it has to do with what we're really worried about for the killer whales is the mothers
yeah.
getting calves, right? That's the issue. If the
And
mothers,
I heard they're doing good this year. From
well, I know of
recent
one.
reports.
Recent reports, there's one born.
But
We haven't had too many of the calves survive over the last few years, and that's an issue. So the good part here is the federal government has upped the Chilliwack hatchery. They've given them, I think it was last November, they gave them $1.5 million to make upgrades and to increase the Chinook salmon. So in a few years' time, there'll be
more fish for them to eat.
There'll be more fish for them to eat.
Yeah.
And this particular hatchery has got a fairly, it's helpful for the Chinook fish that they
Yeah.
key in on.
I love killer whales, but I think this has gotten blown, sorry, from my point of view, it's been blown way out of proportion. It's important they're there, and they're important to our environment, they're important to the whole cycle. Their numbers aren't alarming me when I look at the numbers. But
Well,
anyway,
yeah, but if
we probably disagree maybe a little bit.
well,
but
maybe, but if you just do it by, let's say if there's 74 of
beat
them,
it to death
is
either.
is it better to have 100 of them, or is it better to have 74 of them? What I look at it is the mothers and the survival of their calves. We need to have those calves surviving.
Yes.
Okay, that's because a killer whale can live to 100 years old.
That's what do calves eat.
What do the calves eat? They drink milk like any
drink
other
milk.
milk. Yeah, like mammals. They're a
So-
mammal.
So when they go off the nipple, what are they?
Then the
what
mother,
are they eating?
Then,
Little coho
then the mother catches
catches the Chinook?
the Chinook and feeds it to its.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, and
Okay.
the older females literally catch the Chinooks and feed it to mothers, and they share. It's an amazing
that's
thing.
cool.
It's an amazing thing. You know, the older killer whales do a lot of the hunting, and they share the food with others in their pod,
Sum it up.
which is unbelievable.
That's it on our take on killer whales.
Yes.
Anyway, where else were we got? I think we got it covered.
Did we want to
didn't
talk any
about
about?
First Nations?
Well, this is the
This is a
controversy.
touchy subject.
This is a very touchy subject. Okay, let's let's just
brief.
cover the basis
Make it
here.
brief.
Okay, the Canadian Constitution says that Fraser, well, First Nations have a right to fish, and I support that.
They have a right to, like everybody, they have a right to fish, but they have a priority.
They have a priority right to it,
over
especially for
sports fishermen.
over sports fishermen and commercial. Fish. The only thing that their priority does not trump is conservation. Okay, so conservation is ultimately
Trumps everything.
Trumps everything. And when it comes to conservation, there's Kasawik, and SARA, which I can't remember what Kasawik stands for, but SARA is the Species at Risk Act, and that's the one that is really what we're worried about. Because if the different runs get listed under SARA, then that creates a whole whack of regulations and a whole whack of things that are going to be very detrimental to recreational fishermen.
The fact is that we don't want to get to that point.
We don't want them to get to that point.
But right now, the fisheries, just to make clear, the fisheries notice on the Fraser River, it states we aren't allowed to fish. The guys in Vancouver aren't allowed to fish until August 1st, sports fishing. But July 15th, it's open for gill netting for the natives.
What? Oh,
it is.
It's
the
food
Fraser,
fishery.
the
Food
for the
fishery.
food fishery. Right now, it's open for First Nations for ceremonial fishing
and social maybe.
And social media. It's open. We're not. I have questions. How many are they allowed to keep? Because it's not in the fisheries notice. How many they're allowed for ceremonial fish? Gil was saying they get 10 fish and it's a right of their ceremony to first of every year they get their 10 fish and they have a barbecue ceremonial fish.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are, but
might not be 10.
Yeah,
it might be 2. I don't know.
So the first fish of the year, and these ceremonies and these social events
have been around for years.
Have been with us with them for 10,000, maybe 14,000 years, and it's really important that these folks,
the tradition continues.
Continues. It's just like I come from a fishing background, recreational fishing, and I find that this social part of the fishing is really critical to me and my well-being. And I imagine it's for them too.
Basically, to sum my point up, I understand that, but I surely hope if we're not catching a fish and keeping it, that First Nations will not be gill netting when those runs of concern are going up the river to spawn.
Well, that's
what I surely hope will happen.
That's probably
right now they're allowed ceremonial fish only.
Yes,
they're
as far as I
closed
know,
till July 15th.
July 15th. So a lot of the runs that we're really worried about.
Commercial guys are closed till
August
20th. I think they said seining or the trolling.
Yeah, that's area H or something. That's way up north.
The commercial guys are getting hit too.
Oh yes,
so everybody knows they're getting hit hard too.
So basically, for allocation, which is really important, the allocation is conservation first, First Nations, ceremonial, food fishery. What's the first one?
That's it. You got it.
Okay, that
ceremonial.
Their allocation, they need to have their needs met. When their needs are met, then recreational, then our needs need to be met. And then when our needs are met, then it's commercial.
And that's what's going on in a nutshell with the First Nations.
And
I'll sum it up right.
I know there's lots of different things on
a lot of different theories.
Lots of different theories. Lots of rumors out there, and it's
a hot potato.
It's a hot potato out here. There's no doubt about that.
I just hope they put conservation first, always.
Oh, always.
Same as us.
And Kasawik is Committee on the Status of Endangered
To
Wildlife
be able to fish.
in Canada.
For sure.
Kasawik.
I want my little Finn, my grandson, and my granddaughter to be able to catch a Chinook. Hannah needs a Chinook.
Yes. Well, now
Yeah.
let's skip this right back to this Kosowick and Sarah, because this is what's really driving the bus here, and it's we just I'll just read you this thing. In November 2018, Kosowick released the results from an assessment of 16 southern BC designated units. Now these are designated units, could be like from a whole river watershed, one designated unit. Okay, so out of those 16, 13 of those designated units were origins of the Fraser unit. 7 were assessed as endangered. Okay, 4 threatened and 1 a special concern. Okay, so the South Thompson Ocean summer Chinooks were deemed not at risk. So out of those 13, only 1 of them were not a problem. Okay, so
we've already touched that.
yes, we know that
We don't need to.
this is what's really driving the bus here on this stuff. So it's the conservation, and with that conservation, all the rest of the allocation flows from there. So that's where we need to do that.
The only thing we didn't touch on is sea lions, but Scotty didn't ask anything about sea lions.
Well, we could cover that.
I don't want to go there. My personal opinion is they should be some kind of not a cull, but a harvest.
A harvest.
I've seen the sea lions.
Predator management.
I've seen the sea lions in action, but
Oh, yes.
I am not pushing hard for that one. I think eventually it will happen. Harvest. I hope.
Yeah,
Because their numbers are exploding, and they're sitting in front of estuaries and they're eating smolts.
And
I've seen it.
Yes, and they've been doing a lot of science on those sea lions and seals, and one of the big ones is the seals, the harbor seals.
They train each other and they come
yeah,
back.
and it seems to be
They teach the babies and
there's not all seals go after salmon, after the smolts. Those are the ones that we're worried about. It's a learned behavior, and what they've done with some DNA, and they take the scat from the haul outs and they analyze it, and they've found that it's the younger males and not so much the females for some reason. So they're very particular which seals are the problem ones, and
so
if we can address
if we
that,
can
that would
get
be
rid of
good.
all those ones, I'd be happy.
Yes, me too.
But the touch base on how this affected me, I've lost. I don't know. Right off the bat, and I lost about $5,000 in business as soon as they made the announcement. I know my phone and my emails have pretty well ceased. I did get 2 bookings on the weekend. One from a guy in Singapore that wants to take his kids out in June. He's coming here to visit Comox Valley, and I thought that was pretty cool. And he's okay in June with doing catch and release, but I got to do a little bit of jigging with cod and stuff, but for the kids, right? Sole. Try to get some flatfish. To his main focus is his kids, and then I got another booking for August when we're allowed to retain 1 Chinook a person. But my phone and emails basically pretty well stopped compared to other years.
Well,
Other guides I've talked to are in the same position. I'm worried about the guys that are very dependent on it. Like buddies of mine that are very dependent, that have wives, children, and they're dependent on that money that they make in the summer. Me, I have a pension from the military. I do this because I love it. I love seeing people smile. I love getting them out on the water, experiencing it. Now I need to learn how to. My guide, Greg, he's going to join me soon. He's got to learn catch and release. He's a bit concerned about that. But normally we'd be able to keep a fish. So I'm worried about my son. My son, he's doing okay. He works at a lodge. He has his own boat. He's independent. But his lodge is small. And they fish their own clients. People don't pay to go to the lodge. They fish their clients that they have during the winter. So they're not dependent on keeping fish, so they're keeping open for catch and release. Other lodges, I'm not sure. I haven't heard about any lodges locally that are closing. I know some guides have sold their businesses and quit. But I haven't heard of lodge. Like, how's it going to affect April Point? And, I'm worried about that too. Campbell River, I think, is going to take a hit.
Oh,
But
there's no doubt.
There's lots of places that are going to take a hit here. And jobs.
We would much prefer that we'd like to, keep fish. That's for sure. But
everybody, not everybody. That I had guys on the weekends from Saskatchewan that when I phoned them and told them they couldn't keep their fish, they kept their booking for 2 days and they had a blast. They loved it. We were catching, releasing springs, and it was good. It worked out fine. But some guys of my regulars said, "Nope, we're not coming. Sorry, we got to keep our fish. We like to have our food."
yeah.
Which I understand. I want to barbecue a fresh one, but I can't. I got to wait till July, or unless I get a coho. Sorry, they're gonna open coho
June 1st.
June 1st, usually 2 hatcheries. I'm worried about the hit on the lingcod. A lot of guys are gonna fish lingcod. I'm worried. I'm more concerned about that now. Rock cod, I'm concerned about. Coho, I'm concerned about. I personally don't think it was a wise decision they made here on these closures. I think the one, maybe keep the first fish you catch, or they could have made it just hatcheries. I've let a lot of hatchery salmon go. They have their antipose clipped.
Yeah, I would.
I don't know, something in those lines. I would have liked to have some kind of retention so guys aren't out there beating up lingcod and things like that.
I tend to agree that it would have been really nice if we would have been able to keep hatchery fish. That, to me, would have been very handy.
Anyway, so
not much we can
we
do.
we should sum this up, I guess, because we've been 40 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So let's sum
too
it up.
much. Okay.
We could talk forever on this.
Yes, and
anybody that watches this, more power to you, because there's a lot of information, and we didn't even cover all of it.
And
really.
I guess another thing is, if you go on DFO's website, you can actually get a lot of this information on why the decisions have been made the way they are. The department, I'm not sure if it's. I think they do what they call a state of the ocean, and they do it once a year. Yeah. Usually it comes out around now.
www.
I don't know. I just use
State
Google.
of the ocean.
I usually put DFO, State of the Ocean.
State of the Ocean. And you can read a lot more about it.
Yeah, there's lots there that tells you about, why we're getting to these points with it.
Well, we'll sum it up.
And I guess to sum it up is right now there's a lot of stocks that are trending towards getting into real trouble. And we got to turn that trend around to trending to building. And we know we can do it. We've got the Cowichan River to prove it. That we can do it, and it doesn't take that long. It takes a lot of effort. It takes getting people together, communicating between us. Round table. Oh, fantastic! I don't know how that will work for the Fraser because it's so huge, but getting industry, getting First Nations, getting recreationals, getting commercial, getting environmentalists, getting everybody together because we all want the same thing.
The 1,000 cuts. We got to deal with.
Remove the 1,000 cuts.
We got to deal with a lot of things here.
So we get everybody working together instead of trying to fight each other and keep pointing fingers and.
It's complicated.
Oh, it's complicated. That's complicated. So, and I know there's a lot of people with a lot of goodwill, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are probably using this to their advantage to stir up a lot of shit. But trust the people that are of goodwill.
Peace. Peace out.
Yeah.
I guess this is it for Cliff and Gil.
Okay.
It was good, Gil. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
Peace, buddy. You guys take it easy on Facebook land. Ciao.